Lecture number 30, what effects did the Monroe Doctrine and the Roosevelt Corollary have on Latin America? The first thing we have to understand is what the Monroe Doctrine is. It was passed by President Monroe in 1823, and it was supposed to protect the new countries of Latin America. And here's the United States up here, here's Latin America down here, here's Central America right here, and the Caribbean right here. So these countries had been formed in the post-Napoleonic War, and they were former colonies of Spain and France and Britain. And what the Americans wanted to do was protect it. That's what Monroe said in his speech. But what they said basically is that no more colonization in Latin America, and America should be free of European influence. They kind of stayed out of each other's affairs. So here's a political cartoon showing that. Here's Uncle Sam putting his hat, the Monroe Doctrine, on the Western Hemisphere, and here's all the European countries looking on. Now, the reason they wanted to do this is they wanted to make sure that America stayed strong. And the British were in favor of this. The U.S. actually did not have the military strength to back this up, so the British Navy is the one who enforces it. And they wanted to make sure that Spain and France remained weak so Britain could remain strong. Britain was trying to become the powerhouse of that time period. And Britain was imperializing India and Africa and so on. So that was the background of the Monroe Doctrine. It basically said the U.S. only in that area, no European powers. Roughly 100 years later, Teddy Roosevelt's the president, and he adds the Corollary. A corollary is a traditional law, and it's the Roosevelt Corollary of the Monroe Doctrine. And it says the United States is the international police power in the Caribbean and Latin America. And here it is. Here is the gun. Here's the Monroe Doctrine on the gun. And this is shooting at European claims to the Dominican Republic right here. So that's a very famous political cartoon. You'll talk a lot more about that next year in U.S. history. Now, Teddy Roosevelt not only was made the U.S. the international police power, and he also built up the U.S. Navy. He also supported the revolution in Colombia to create the Panama Canal. And this would increase trade between the two coasts of the United States, the East Coast and the West Coast. You used to have to sail 13,000 miles around Latin America if you were to go from New York to California. But with the creation of the Panama Canal, you're going to connect the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, and you're going to increase trade. And here's a political cartoon of Teddy Roosevelt. And using the U.S. Navy, they supported a revolution in Panama from Colombia. Now, what this creates is intervention in Latin America, because we have the Roosevelt Corollary. And here are the various times we've intervened. In Cuba, about 4 or 5 times. And we have a very complex relationship with Cuba today. In Mexico in 1914, in Nicaragua in 1911, in Panama, in Venezuela, in the Virgin Islands, in Puerto Rico, and the Dominican Republic. So we've intervened again and again and again under the Roosevelt Corollary, trying to establish our dominance in the region. And what this has created is a trade imbalance. So Latin America trades raw materials, especially to the United States. And here are the various things we get from Latin America. Bananas, cacao, which we call chocolate today, coffee, cotton, nitrates. These are really important, especially in gunpowder production. Sugarcane, all of you, if you like sugar, if you like candy, chocolate and sugar comes from Latin America and is processed by the Hershey Company or the Mars family. Wool, and so you have all these products, and they're being exported to the United States. And what the United States does with those products, and European as well, is they make manufactured goods and they sell them back to these Latin American countries. This chart right here shows you that the GDP of Argentina is going to keep on dropping, the gross domestic product, because what's happening, if you read this chart, is that Latin American countries, Argentina, Brazil, Chile, and Mexico, have a lower GDP because they're exporting raw materials and they're importing manufactured goods. So there's this very complex relationship that develops economically where Latin America is economically imperialized by the United States. They depend on selling products to the U.S. And that creates this kind of situation. Latin America lacks manufacturing. There's fewer factories in Latin America or South America and the Caribbean than in North America. They rely wholly on exporting goods to North America and to Europe. And that is the impact the Roosevelt Corollary and the Monroe Doctrine have had on this continent. Thanks.